believes that they will not. I love Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. It's hard to believe, but the American election isn't over yet, and it's apparently Russia's fault. Also, the new meme, Assad will stay, and Donald Trump's worldview. Two Crosstalk stories in the media. I'm joined by my guest here in Moscow, Mark Sleboda. He's an international affairs and security analyst. We also have Alex Christoforou. He is the director and writer for theduran.com. And in Beirut, we cross to Martin Jay. He is a freelance broadcast journalist based in Beirut. All right, gentlemen, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. I'd like to go to Martin in Beirut first. You know, over the last couple of news cycle, we have a new report, secret report from the CIA, that the Russians were actually behind the hacking and meddling in the American election. And on top of that, we have the fake news meme, and we also have people doubting the legitimacy of the Trump impending Trump presidency. It's a very interesting perfect storm when you have all of these topics colliding with each other. And on top of it, in the very end, we have Donald Trump going into the White House, and he has enemies already in the intelligence community. So the media is having a real whirlwind here. Go ahead.
I think he's going to have a lot more enemies in the future if he carries on with this sort of rogue president status that he seems to have acquired. I mean, I think it was last week, he phoned up the Prime Minister of Pakistan without even consulting the State Department. This completely broke protocol going back from the very beginning. So I think he's got a lot of enemies he's going to make if he carries on like this. But, you know, we've had a lot of fake news generated in America, and there seems to be a certain amount of bitterness, a certain amount of vitriol now spewing out from the media and other organizations. And, you know, you've got to ask yourself, well, do you blame them? I mean, he seems to be all over the place. He's done a certain amount of backpedaling on his own policies domestically, but then on the foreign policy circuit, when you look at it very closely, we seem to have heard a lot of very positive rhetoric towards Russia and Putin, for example. Yep. But then look at the appointments that he's just made as CIA director and US Defense Secretary, both, you know, appointments which are very controversial, particularly the last one, who is given to somebody who is very against Iran. Yes. And stands for the old guard in the Middle East of basically Israel as our best buddy and our allies being the Gulf states. And, you know, it's been that way for so long now, why change it? So I think there's, you know, there's a lot still up in the air. I mean, he's coming across as a very recalcitrant new world order president. But
one of the interesting things, let me go to Mark here. One of the interesting things is that if you put all this together, what just Martin did here, this I would call, I'll be a little dramatic here, this looks like a coup d'etat against Donald Trump. The man hasn't even sat in the Oval Office.
Yeah, it's certainly attacks against him. And let me correct you for a second there, Peter. The CIA did not claim that Russia helped elect Trump. An anonymous official reporting to the Washington Post and the New York Times made a statement of what they claim, they believe, is the CIA's position.
But that's secret. That's a secret position.
Based on a secret report, based on secret sources that they can't talk about and they can't show you. But we're going to leak this to the New York Times and the Washington Post.
But we were talking about fake news here, Alex. I mean, that sounds like a typical fake news meme to me.
The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, a Republican, has already spoken about this, says there's no evidence. This was collaborated, it dissected at great length by Glenn Greenwald in The Intercept.
It's a very good piece. But, you know, Alex, what this does is it pollutes the public sphere. I mean, it's already planted in people's minds. We've already heard the Russian meme before, during the campaign, and now it is being resuscitated, remarkably, after Hillary Clinton comes out of hibernation and talks about fake news. I mean, again, these are all connected from the fake queen herself.
Hillary Clinton, who ran a fake news troll factory.
She ran a fake campaign.
And we've come full circle. We've come now back to Russia is interfering with the U.S. elections, or has interfered with the U.S. elections. We have Obama, who at one point said that the Russian economy was in tatters and they're not a great power. All of a sudden now, Russia has the power to control all the media globally, to circumvent any computer security that the United States has, to influence the outcome of elections on machines that aren't even connected on the internet, in places like Michigan. And here we are again. Well, Russia is to blame.
All I can say is Western media better not cross my path, because apparently we are very, very powerful here. Let me go back to Martin. One of the things that... Go ahead, jump in. Go ahead. Jump in.
Apparently, kids in Macedonia have been producing a lot of this fake news anyway, which is being picked up by the mainstream media. So who to trust? I think CNN were probably kicking themselves that they didn't get that particular aspect.
Kids in Macedonia, Washington Post.
The way I see it, the way I see it is that now mainstream media in America is also looking for a huge distraction. Yep. To actually look at the real issues coming up in America, which are much more important, like healthcare, immigration, crime, and so forth. So they're actually playing along with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because what has happened here, I think one of the underlining themes here is that the mainstream media cannot come to terms with how they reported the election and the outcome of the election. I mean, the interesting thing is here, Russia is not meddling in American politics. It's the members of the media. You have these secret sources reporting to the Washington Post, and you have the intelligence agencies. They are meddling in domestic politics.
And is this not a bailout of the establishment media anyway? I mean, just like they bailed out Wall Street, they're bailing out the establishment media. Their traffic is decreasing. Their viewers don't have any trust in them anymore, and so you have the.
So something must be done.
Let's get rid of the competition. Let's get rid of the competition.
I see a lot more involved here than just a media campaign and having to blame someone. Mitch McConnell, again, the Senate Majority Leader, spoke directly. This is a partisan political attack. It is an attempt to delegitimize the Trump presidency. It is an attack on Americans' faith in their democratic and electoral system. What they actually accuse of Russia of trying to do, they're doing completely well, all on their own. They've cast the election in doubt so many ways, between the fake stories about hacking machines.
It's their fault, ultimately. They have done it to themselves here. Martin, also there's a derivative to all of this here, and I think it's quite obvious, is that Trump has made it clear that he wants to have an overture towards Russia, and we see an entire array of forces from Congress to the media that don't want to see that happen. They want to keep these tensions up.
Do you believe that? Do you actually believe? Do you believe him when he says that he wants an overture?
Yeah, I do.
Russia? I'm beginning to have my doubts.
I do, because his possible choice for Secretary of State. We'll talk about that in the second half of the program. But yes, I think he does want to do that. But like you said, Martin, and I agree with you, he's all over the place when it comes to foreign policy. So we have to take it one piece at a time here. And he's lining up people here that are not real policy wonks either. Okay, so it's going to be, no matter what happens, it's going to be a tough opening. Mark, what about the Russia angle as far as relations?
Yeah, I mean, Trump is not planning to be bosom buddies with Russia. The U.S. and Russia are not suddenly going to become bosom buddies. He's pushing a realist foreign policy of cooperation and healthy competition rather than ideological divide between great powers. That's all he's pushing forward here. But that is too much for the Washington foreign policy establishment, the blob, and the media, which serves as its echo chamber. I believe that these accusations are, once again, they attempted to help Clinton win the election by smearing Donald in the first place. But the resuscitation of them is a direct attack on a Trump foreign policy. This is directly to prevent any détente from happening. Because if Trump is presented as being an agent or having only won because of Putin, how then can he pursue a policy of détente?
See, this is creating a halo effect over him. It's a marketing term, and it's negative. When he becomes president, with this news cycle that we're going through right now, is that it's Russia that interfered in the election, and he is actually a willing participant working with an adversarial power.
And I think that's the main point, is that he still has not become president yet. He has, 40-some days before he's inaugurated. So we really don't know how his foreign policy is going to shape up, and the circumstances that are under his control or beyond his control will shape that foreign policy. But they're definitely telling Trump any détente with Russia is a no-go. And if you do pursue that, we are going to hit you hard. And that's what they're sending a message almost, don't do it.
Well, but so far, we haven't heard anything from Camp Trump about this here, as far as about changing course here. He's been remarkably quiet when it comes. He's not stepping up and saying, I'm going to change my Russia policy. So this is something that's still an unknown.
I disagree.
It's still a honeymoon period. I mean, I think he's got a few weeks to a few months of a honeymoon period, which will take over before he starts to actually realise that what he badly needs, what he really does need in a very early point in his first 100 days, is a massive geopolitical victory. He needs a solution in Syria, or he needs a common sense policy in Europe where you have this farcical and dangerous situation of NATO trumps on Russia's border. I mean, how far can we go with that after January the 20th before people start asking real questions? Well, are you with Russia or are you against Russia? I mean, I take Mark's point completely. He's not going to be bosom buddies with Putin. Of course he's not. But we do need a common sense approach to some of these intractable problems which can go off like time bombs at any moment. So unlike other presidents.
But the interesting thing is here, Mark, is that what we have in the waning days of the Obama administration is going double down on everything possible. We'll talk about Syria in the second half of the program, but there's no inclination there that they're going to change all the way up to January 20th.
Well, it bears saying that this announcement through the Washington Post and the New York Times, this partisan attack on Trump, again trying to link him with Clinton, came less than 24 hours after the White House said that there was no evidence that Russia had made any concerted effort to influence. So this, in a way, is an attack by these forces within the U.S. government against Obama. But this is nothing new. During this election, we've seen the FBI and the CIA fighting over Trump. Within Syria, we've seen the CIA and the Pentagon
on the State Department and the White House
against each other, killing each other.
I'm going to jump in here, gentlemen. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on stories in the media. Stay with our team.
Max Kaiser's Financial Survival Guide. You know, they say money doesn't grow on trees. Oh, look, quantitative easing. This is how central banks support dying economies. I'm going to call them right now and say, stop the madness! Stop the madness!
People with stories to tell. Those who deserve to be heard. Studied inside out, but still with unrevealed secrets. Leaders, politicians, thinkers, and witnesses. They're here to speak. Are you there to hear?
I'm Tom Hartman, and I'll give you what the mainstream media can't, the big picture.
There's been no charges filed against him.
And when you question more, you find what you're looking for.
This is the legislative branch of the parliament.
We'll go deeper, investigate, and debate, all so you can get the big picture.
Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing some of the stories that have made a difference in the media.
Okay, I'd like to go back to Martin in Beirut and change gears here. Let's talk about Syria. As we're sitting down here, from what I understand, 93% of Aleppo has been liberated by the Syrian army with Russia's help here. What is the significance of that victory, and what do you think will happen in the last 40 days or so of the Obama administration? Because we know that the waiver on restrictions to arms to so-called rebels, which I call terrorists on this program, has been lifted. What is the implication of that, or is it still a big question mark? Go ahead, Martin.
I still think that it's still too early to say. I don't think it's such a huge game changer as many media pundits say it is. I think we shouldn't fall into this trap of thinking that once Aleppo is taken, the Syrian war in the north there is more or less over. It isn't. There's still a lot more to do. So I think that's sort of been pumped up to some extent by journalists. It's symbolic. It's very symbolic what's happened. And we shouldn't forget that it's one thing for the Syrian regime to take Aleppo, it's quite another to keep it. And it may well be, from a military perspective, that Aleppo falling actually works as a catalyst for a lot of these groups on the ground to work more closely together with each other and actually coordinate. So we'll have to see in the next few weeks whether there is a re-offensive coming from the rebels towards Syria, or indeed whether they regroup and actually look elsewhere on the battlefield.
Mark, your take.
Yeah, I disagree slightly. Of course, this is not going to end the war in one fell swoop. But when we combine the liberation of East Aleppo with Trump coming into office, making clear that he would end support, he's been quite vehement about this, and it gained him no points in the campaign, so he must be serious about it, that he wants to end with the U.S. changing sides, and with, this is, I do believe this is a Stalingrad moment, maybe just the beginning of the end, but it is definitely the beginning of the end.
It's a momentum moment.
It is a momentum moment. Now, Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey are going to keep funding. They're not going to stop this proxy war, but with the U.S. out of the game, that really changes things. And what this prevents is the regime change plan, whereas by Benghazi style from Libya, whereas a rebel capital is declared, a safe zone, and then this is used to make further attacks on the government.
You're making a huge assumption.
Go ahead, Mark.
Alex, you're making a huge assumption that the Americans are out of the game, or they will be out of the game after January the 20th, and we simply don't know that. You know, I'm a great believer that in this premise that the only solution in Syria has to involve Russia and America. We saw just this week this preposterous offer by the European Union to be a broker of peace, offering cash and trade agreements for rebels. How on earth do they think they can possibly implement
a European problem? That's a European solution to a European problem.
The European Union literally offered the Syrian president cash if he would let jihadists rule over part of his country.
If he would let Al Qaeda set up base in certain cities. Yeah, that's the European Union offering this.
Hang on. Can you imagine? You give a whole load of cash to all various groups, Al Qaeda, IS, whatever, and then a week later they decide, well, actually this cash is quite useful. We can buy more guns with it, and just tell the EU where to get off. I mean, how do you implement something so preposterous?
No, they take the money.
It's a completely new level.
No, it's a complete new level of idiocy. They take the money, they buy arms, and they say they want more money. Okay, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is nothing new. These Islamists and jihadists have been on the payroll of the U.S., the EU, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar for 6 years now. What's a little bit more taxpayer money thrown in to keep them on the table?
And I think we see just how ineffective the European Union is when trying to mediate or get involved in these types of foreign policy or geopolitical issues. I mean, they are literally ineffective.
Well, this is the outcome for the last 25 years of playing second fiddle to the United States, okay?
Right.
And when the U.S. doesn't know what to do or is doubling down, the Europeans are left there at the children's table here. But Alex, let me go to you. I said in my introduction, the new meme, Assad will stay. I think we have to get used to that because I think he is going to stay. If Angela Merkel exits in 2017, then he will have outlasted them all.
All of them. Isn't that ironic? Every one of them, from Cameron to Obama to Clinton, always carry Assad must go.
Yeah,
Hollande?
I'm not so much on the Assad will stay. We're well past that at this point. I'm on the Assad must go curse. I'm counting. I've got a little calendar. I'm crossing off faces.
You've got the faces of everyone
who declared
the New Zealand leader
regime
also.
change in Syria, who have all left first. Obama's next up to bat.
Can I just say one thing when we're talking about the media and how they're covering Aleppo? At least I was looking at all the establishment media news stories, and they've shifted away from Aleppo, a lot of them. And you want to know what they're covering today? Palmyra. Of course. And I was shocked to see ISIS has retaken Palmyra. I'm like, fake news or real news? Yeah. What's going on here? So they've shifted now to ISIS is retaking Palmyra.
You know, Martin, it's very interesting watching the events unfold in Aleppo. Is that you have again a lot more skewed reporting in Western media about what is happening in Aleppo. They give the impression that it is being conquered by the Damascus government, not liberated. We're one of the only news outlets that actually uses the word liberated. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, you have so much of Western media now is struggling financially to survive. It's having to look more and more at clickbait and fake news, and a lot of these correspondents who are writing about Aleppo are not even in the region. Some of them are in Brussels and Paris and London, you know, and they're relying very, very heavily on that incredibly well-informed, endorsed, substantiated news source called Twitter. You know, and who's feeding Twitter? You know, activists, fake people, all sorts of crackpots, you know, which you can't really follow up and check on. You know, so I mean, I think it's inevitable.
You know, Mark, it's interesting is that it's in the Syria saga is that the Western media has become a victim of its own propaganda. They actually cannot understand what they're seeing when they see families running joyously towards the Syrian army. It does not compute. They cannot understand what they see in front of them, or they just say it's fake. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, there's an absolute feedback loop between the Western mainstream media and the government that is intentionally generating propaganda, and they're feeding on each other. The Guardian reported long ago how the British government was essentially running and organizing and funding and running these Syria opposition's media campaigns, propaganda campaigns on social media, out there across the board. They are literally operating. They have people working in Istanbul creating material as if they are Syrian rebels for the British government.
And we have the white helmets.
And we have the white helmets.
That's the eye candy in this war, right?
And they're using social media very effectively as well, as is the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights in London as well. One guy in London.
The Saudi Arabian government is funding doing the same thing in Washington D.C., hiring Washington D.C. lobbyists to present themselves to create material for this Syrian opposition, this regime change operation, the propaganda side of it. So the media is playing into this. It's a feedback loop. Just like in Afghanistan, we've seen our own military and government are making decisions based on the propaganda that they have ordered created and has been echoed and amplified and distorted even further by the media.
But the propaganda is great because they use, once again, simple words, moderate rebels.
Hey, Martin and Beirut, jump in. Go ahead.
It's just a vicious circle, you know. Once you feed in an untruth, and a huge international organisation like NATO or EU or the State Department makes some sort of a statement but doesn't back it up, you know, some of that actually filters through into the media, and a few days later, what is actually inference and gossip and unsubstantiated, in some cases completely fake news, becomes the truth. Yeah. You know, and this is the danger. I see it. I watch it all the time on Twitter. Yeah. I see stories where somebody in Washington says something, and then a few days later, that's reported. The minor details reported as a fact. Yeah. You know, and this is what's going on in Syria a lot. I mean, even the EU deal, you know, was actually something leaked by a spin doctor in Brussels to a Times correspondent here. You know, the correspondent didn't make any effort to say in his report, this is just an idea. Yeah. It's a notion. Okay. You know, someone cooked this up. You know.
And then it becomes real. You know, Mark, it's like during the First World War, is that you would have a minister contact a newspaper, leak some information. The newspaper writes it, and then they print it, and then the politician that leaked it quotes himself, okay?
Yeah,
as if it's
as
news.
evidence.
Okay.
Yeah. A perfect example of this is that for more than a year now, we have heard echoed by the media, by the U.S. government, and continued on by the UN, that there were 300,000 civilians in East Aleppo. Now, as there were a number of civilians held hostage by Al-Qaeda and the other sectarian militant groups funded by the U.S. and Saudi Arabia there. But there were some that were willing participants in all of this, of course, as well. Some of their families and others. But that number has obviously been whittled down out of existence. We've seen Russia has announced that they have officially evacuated almost 80,000 civilians from East Aleppo, with only 7% of East Aleppo remaining.
We got 1 minute, guys. Rex Tillerman, former CEO at ExxonMobil, could be Secretary of State. We got 1 minute. I want to go to all three of you. Alex first.
They're going to really hit him hard on his connections with Russia. That's definite. And the environmentalist lobby is going to also hit him hard.
Martin, what do you think? You know, we're going to have an oil man possibly as Secretary of State. Is that a good idea?
I think it's the thin end of the wedge, and I think we can expect more powerful people from industry to be part of Donald Trump's entourage. It may even be Nigel Farage himself taking on the Middle East. So
real quick, Mark.
Yeah, Trump, if he's pursuing Russian détente, he couldn't have picked a better person. He couldn't get Dana Rohrabacher or Tulsi Gabbard through a McCain-dominated Senate. But is McCain and Lindsey Graham going to go up against big oil to stop a Secretary of State promotion? I don't think they can do it.
That's very interesting. Gentlemen, we've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow and in Beirut. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, Crosstalk rules.
I love you.